In this question, we're being asked about an electric circuit. The question says the student builds a different circuit. Figure 11 shows the circuit. Explain how the reading on both meters change when the environmental conditions change. Now, the reason the question says the student builds a different circuit is because this is part 4 of question 6. So in the previous parts of the questions, they must have been talking about a different question. Now, this is a 6-mark question, and this student gained 1 mark for their answer in the real exam. So they said when the light intensity is higher, the light dependent resistor will give a different resistance. Voltage equals current times resistance. So the voltage would increase or decrease with the resistance given from the LDR. The reading on the ammeter will move in the opposite direction to the resistance. Now, the students got some good knowledge, but they're giving a very, very vague answer. They're using terms like the resistance will be different. Well, will it be higher or lower? They've got to be specific. They're telling me the voltage would increase or decrease. Well, which one? They need to be specific. They've told me the ammeter reading will move in the opposite direction of the resistance. What direction? What do they mean? Because they've been so vague, the examiner can't award them any more marks than 1. The 1 mark comes here. If you actually look, you can see where they've typed the word tick. That's because it's marked on a computer, so that's how it appears when it's then printed. They've got that mark for saying when the light intensity is higher and identifying the component as a light dependent resistor. If I go back to the question was very vague. It said explain how the readings on both meters, didn't say what types of meters they were. And it said when the environmental conditions change. That's very vague. What environmental conditions? But this student has identified this component as a light dependent resistor. So it's when the light intensity, when the brightness changes, that the circuit will change. And they've got credit for knowing it is a light dependent resistor, for knowing it depends on light. So they've identified the environmental conditions, and that's how they've got their 1 mark. To get more marks in this question, they just need to be more specific. So instead of saying it will give a different resistance, well, when the light intensity is higher, the resistance will actually be lower. So we'll give a lower resistance. I assume this student couldn't remember whether it was higher or lower, and they thought if they'd be general, maybe they'd pick up some marks. They probably would have been better if they couldn't remember guessing one way or the other, because then they would have had more of a chance of getting marks. But being vague like this can't get you any marks. They've then gone on to say voltage is current times resistance. So the voltage would increase or decrease. Well, actually, if the resistance is lower, then less energy will be needed for the current to flow through the resistor. If less energy is needed, that's the same as me saying the voltage will decrease. So I'm going to cross out increase. So the voltage would decrease. So the voltmeter reading would decrease because less energy is needed to get through a lower resistance. They've then said the reading on the ammeter will move in the opposite direction of the resistance. They actually mean the right thing. If the resistance goes down, it is easier for current to flow. So the resistance goes down, mean the current will go up. The reading on the ammeter, rather than will move in the opposite direction, they should have said the reading on the ammeter will increase. And the question did ask me to explain. So it will increase because it is easier for current to flow. Because the resistance is lower. Now that will get them a lot more marks. They have been specific, they know exactly what's happening. That would be a much better answer. That would be a 5 or 6 mark answer, because if they had written that, they've correctly identified what the environmental conditions are. They've identified what the 2 meters are measuring, because we weren't told it in the question. They've said how they would change if the light level had increased. They could also, if the student had written when the light intensity is less, they could have given the exact opposite answer and still got the marks. If the light intensity was less, then the resistance would be higher. That would make the voltage increase, which would make the current decrease. So it would just be the opposite of what we've written. So hopefully with that, they would gain more marks.